Okay. Then let's dig in.
Well, just give me 1 minute here to look at the Costas thing.
Go. You have 58 seconds.
Well, and glancing at your books, I noticed that in the columns
You have 48 seconds left. Hurry, hurry.
I glanced at your books, I noticed in the
28 seconds. You're running out of time.
Mr. Bialystok, I cannot function under these conditions. You're making me extremely nervous.
Support for Trifles comes from listeners like you, who support us through Patreon and Substack. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/trifles and at trifles.substack.com. And now you can enjoy some Trifles swag, mugs, notepads, and oval stickers, available in our store. Find it at ihearofsherlock.com/merchandise.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the lodger was veiled, the face was yellow, and the valley was fearsome, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever stopped to wonder what kind of medical practice Dr. Watson actually ran? Or about the number of Holmes's monographs? Or how much the rent was at 221B Baker Street?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 479. Thaddeus Sholto, Misdiagnosed. Hello and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast, where we get into the minutiae of the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And Burt, I never miss an opportunity to diagnose you.
Oh, well, I'm so easy. You
seem to be suffering from perpetual optimism.
Oh, no, I'm in all of the medical textbooks. I'm a footnote everywhere. Yeah. You look under idiot, blithering.
No.
And that's really the big entry.
No. That's an end note.
Yeah.
Not a footnote.
Yeah. They call me Mr. ICD Code. Yeah, I'm well known.
Well,
in fact, everyone, every time, it's a little disturbing sometimes, but every time I go to a new physician, once or twice a week, they sort of gaze off, looking above my hairline into a corner of the room, and I'll say, "Doctor, what, now that you've heard my history, what are you thinking about?" And he just mumbles something about autopsy. But I'm not discouraged by it.
Well, there's an easy way to fix that. Stop going to the doctor.
Oh.
And then you'll never hear those words again.
That's true. That's true.
Well, we are here to talk about the work of another doctor, a doctor who wrote the 2004 Morley Montgomery Award-winning essay. That is what was judged that year in the Baker Street Journal as the best article. As you know, it's called Thaddeus Sholto, Misdiagnosed. The author is Konstantin Rozakis, who happens to be a cardiologist himself. So he is someone who is speaking from professional expertise as he applies that to this particular piece of canonical research. It's from volume 54, number 1, spring 2004 of the Baker Street Journal, and it's what we'll be discussing today. Now, if you'd like to support us, you can do that by going to Patreon or Substack. The links in the show notes there will guide you for as little as $1 a month, or even less if you choose an annual plan. We offer a discount. You get to say that you are doing your part to keeping green the memory of Sherlock Holmes and supporting what we do here on Trifles, allowing us to do the research, hosting costs, etc., everything that goes into producing a fine quality show like this. And to show you our gratitude, we're actually going to be giving you the answers to a quiz, a little impromptu quiz we had. I guess it was in episode 475, if I'm not mistaken, the case of Jay. It's the Morley Montgomery award-winning episode that we did last month. We asked you to identify some of the stories that we talked about then. That'll be coming up after we're done discussing this one. So stay tuned. If you entered, you want to see if you are among those who might be a winner. So stay tuned. Okay, well, we are going to be talking about Thaddeus Sholto, misdiagnosed. Well, just to kind of ground us here, Bert, as we get ready to jump into Costa's paper, the name Thaddeus Sholto, that sounds familiar. Where?
Well, Thaddeus Sholto, is one of those Sholto brothers, like Bartholomew. And like Major Sholto, he's a minor Sholto, but not a minimalist by any means. He's Thaddeus Sholto. He's a main guy.
Yeah, and he's the Sholto that survived, I believe.
Yes, Brother Bartholomew Croaks.
Yeah, he caught the dart to the neck.
Indeed,
and. It was Thaddeus who, seemed to have some kind of nervous condition. He was kind of a peculiar individual, but
he was delighted when he found himself in the presence of a physician.
Yes,
because he's the one in Sign of Four who invited through an intermediary, Mary Morstan, to come accompanied by two friends, if she wished, to the third pillar on the left of the Lyceum Theatre.
There it is.
And that got us well into the case of the Sign of Four.
That's exactly right. So right away, Costa takes us into the land of medicine in the Sherlock Holmes stories. He says the canon is replete with references to medical conditions, maladies, and various disease states. The vast majority of these are allusions to or diagnoses of sundry neuroses, nervous disorders, or brain fever. And then he lists some of the stories that contain neuroses, nervous disorders, or brain fever, namely The Resident Patient, Study in Scarlet, Boscombe Valley Mystery, Six Napoleons, Barrel Coronet, Naval Treaty, Copper Beaches, Cardboard Box, Crooked Man, and Musgrave Ritual. Oh, as well as The Hound of the Baskervilles. And then he says there's a host of epidemiologically wide-ranging, quote-unquote, infections. And those can be found in The Sign of Four, A Study in Scarlet, Case of Identity, Gloria Scott, Yellow Face, Dying Detective, Abbey Grange, Sussex Vampire, Hound of the Baskervilles, The Missing Three-Quarter, and The Final Problem. Oh, and The Valley of Fear as well. And he says these are all well cataloged, and for the purposes of this discussion, will not be elucidated further. So put that in the back of your mind for now, because we're not going to cover any of that. But far more interesting for a cardiologist, he says, are questions regarding the true terminal event of Sir Charles Baskerville, or the specific type of aortic aneurysm culminating in the death of Jefferson Hope. These concerns and questions may be the subject of a future paper. Oh, okay. Well, with respect to valvular heart disease, however, only one story and character come to mind. Any guesses? Anyone? It's Thaddeus Sholto in The Sign of Four. So right away, he gets all these other diseases out of our mind, out of the way, and focuses in here on Thaddeus Sholto.
Yeah. In Victorian and Edwardian England, and indeed even today on a worldwide basis, counting the hundreds of millions in underdeveloped or third world countries, the most common cause of valvular heart disease requiring intervention is rheumatic mitral stenosis, with or without regurgitation. Physicians in Conan Doyle's era were all attuned to this, and a diagnosis could easily be made by routine auscultation, Although rheumatic fever can affect the mitral and aortic valves, no other specific valvular abnormality is mentioned outright in the canon. Fitzroy McPherson, the science master in the Lion's Mane, whose life had been crippled by heart trouble following rheumatic fever, no doubt had a rheumatic cardiomyopathy, a disease of the heart muscle following rheumatic fever, given the fact that serious valvular pathology occurs decades after rheumatic fever. And he is described as a fine, upstanding, a young fellow.
Mitral valve prolapse, MVP. And Bert, you're the MVP of this show, by the way. You make my heart go pitter-patter. MVP syndrome, unknown, or at least not well defined in Conan Doyle's era, is a disorder that continues to undergo refinements in diagnosis, prevalence, and association, and with other physical as well as psychological disorders. DaCosta, in the late 19th century, described an irritable heart disorder in Civil War soldiers who complained of extreme anxiety, fear, palpitations, chest pains, and syncope. In one early British study of irritable heart syndrome, Levine suggested that this entry be termed neurocirculatory asthenia, and other authors called it cardiac neurosis. It wasn't until 1963 that Barlow demonstrated that the osculatory findings in patient groups similar to the above are frequently associated with the prolapse of the mitral valve. I could find no mention of MVP in any of the medically related writings of the canon. Van Leer, a physiologist, incorrectly refers to Thaddeus's condition as cardiac neurosis, as above, and Roden, a pathologist, refers to it as hypochondriasis. Ramanan, writing in the Archives of Internal Medicine, states, Thaddeus Sholto clearly manifested the features of cardiac neurosis. And just by way of reference, Van Leer, that we mentioned there, that's Ed Van Leer, E.J. Van Leer, A Doctor Enjoys Sherlock Holmes. That was written in 1959 and published by Vantage Press. And Roden refers to Roden and Key's medical casebook of Dr. Arthur Conan Doyle. And that was written in 1984. And Ramanan's Archives of Internal Medicine piece was titled Cardiovascular Disease and the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes from March 2001.
Yeah. We go on here, the salient clinical features of MVP syndrome, now this again is mitral valve prolapse, can include anxiety, cardiac neurosis, giddiness, palpitations, panic disorder, sound like someone familiar, and atypical chest pain. Auscultatory findings. Now we should, to prevent our listeners from heading off for the ibuprofen here, auscultatory, some of these words, auscultatory is listening to things with your stethoscope. So this is what auscultatory means. Auscultatory findings, murmurs and clicks, may or may not be immediately evident, so we can't blame Watson for potentially missing them. Most interestingly, many MVP patients have a keen self-awareness of their condition bordering on hypochondriacal states. MVP syndrome is also the most prevalent cardiac valvular abnormality. Now that's obviously, folks, about the heart valve. Certainly in the Caucasian population, affecting as many as 5% to 15% of individuals.
And Rasakis writes, armed with these data, we could do no better than to revisit, quote, an oasis of art in the howling desert of South London. And that, of course, refers to Thaddeus Sholto's little sanctum, as he called it. A doctor, eh? Cried he, much excited. Have you a stethoscope? Might I ask you, would you have the kindness? I have grave doubts as to my mitral valve, if you would be so very good. The aortic I may rely upon, but I should value your opinion upon the mitral. I listened to his heart as requested, but was unable to find anything amiss, save indeed that he was in an ecstasy of fear, for he shivered from head to foot. Appears to be normal, I said. You have no cause for uneasiness. You will excuse my anxiety, Miss Morstan, he remarked airily. I am a great sufferer, and I have long had suspicions as to that valve.
Following Thaddeus Sholto's remarkable narrative and noble confession, he continues to expound, even as he bids farewell to his visitors. My health is somewhat fragile, he remarked as he led the way down the passage. I am compelled to be a valetudinarian. A valetudinarian is a hypochondriac. This is someone who is excessively worried about their health or who's chronically sick. So he says, I'm compelled to be a valetudinarian. Compelled indeed. Thaddeus Sholto had, says Costa, microvalve prolapse syndrome. A more accurate description of the persona of MVP could hardly be found in any heart specialist's office even today. Patients with MVP are more prone to cardiac arrhythmias, and the syndrome certainly has a higher incidence in family members with the disorder. Major John Sholto, upon seeing the face of Jonathan Small pressed against his window, almost certainly died of an arrhythmia brought on by extreme anxiety and fear, and very likely had MVP himself as an arrhythmic substrate. It's remarkable as well that Thaddeus expressed grave doubts as to his mitral valve. In essence, he was correct.
And Costa pulls out a quote from Silver Blaze. Nothing clears up a case so much as stating it to another person. As an entertaining litmus test for my own theory, after a recent quarterly cardiology section meeting, I asked 7 of my colleagues to indulge me by allowing me to read aloud the above passage that had ignited my thinking about Sholto's true condition. When I polled them for a cardiac diagnosis, 5 of the 7 thought he had probable MVP, and the 6th thought it was certainly possible, but he would be more comfortable with the diagnosis if some osculatory finding was described. I then disclosed that the chapter and story were written by Dr. A.C. Doyle and published in 1890. I chose not to bore them with the delicious bibliographic details, as none were Sherlockians. And that was decades before any accurate clinical description of MVP syndrome existed. All of the attendings in session chuckled, and 2 congratulated me after our meeting for a clever and insightful reading of the chapter. I retorted that it was great fun, but certainly not so quote-unquote clever. One, Dr. T, insisted it was and wanted me to present it to some of our cardiology fellows in training. Dr. T also knows Latin, which allowed me to congé from the Red-Headed League. Omne ignotum pro magnifico. I walked away with a smile on my face. And there it ends.
Superb.
Now, of course, we should explain that Latin quote, omne ignotum pro magnifico. I think the loose translation is everything becomes simple by explanation.
Yeah. Well, I always thought it meant everyone is ignorant but you magnificently so. I guess I've taken it wrong all these years.
I know. I can't believe it. But yeah, it was one of those things where, it's just so obvious out there in the open. Well, as we promised, we'd like to get you to that impromptu quiz we had a month ago in the Case of Jay episode. We called it a Baker Street Dozen. We identified 13 or asked you to identify 13 stories as we went through the mention in that particular paper. So just to refresh your memory, so we're all kind of operating along the same vein here, we're going to go through that segment from that paper, and we will name each of the stories, and then we'll reveal who the winners were. So, Bert,
yes,
I will allow you to guide us through this, because for anyone who listens to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, we know we can't always count on you for accurate answers.
Yes. So I guess this is not the Franklin W. Dixon story, The Secret Panel with Joe and Frank Hardy, this first one. Oh, well.
Oh, so
okay,
close.
Here.
So close.
Let's go. The first account, published by Jay, sets the tragic tone for virtually all the other marriages that he described over the next 40-odd years. In that story, a young woman was forced to marry a man she did not love, despite the fact that she was in love with another. The young woman died within a month of her marriage, and the man she loved avenged her death by murdering her husband.
Yes, that would be A Study in Scarlet.
Bum, bum, bum. The tragic marriage might be regarded as an incidental issue were it not for the pattern that it initiates. Indeed, a similar theme appears in other cases Jay has recorded. For example, in another published case, a young woman was forced to marry someone, despite the fact that she was in love with another, as soldiers in India. The man she married had betrayed the man she loved, allowing him to be captured by the enemy in order to remove him as a rival for the woman's affections. When the poor man she'd loved made his way back to England after 30 years, her husband became apoplectic and died.
Why, that's The Crooked Man.
In another published story, a man beat his wife and was murdered in turn by an old admirer of the woman. In yet another story, in a small variation on the theme, a woman was forced into a fraudulent marriage. It takes little imagination to see that this repeated pattern holds some fascination for Jay.
Well, those are The Abbey Grange and The Solitary Cyclist.
In another tale, the wife of a man of diplomatic rank gave a highly confidential and inflammatory letter to a spy. This represents an almost incomprehensible level of spousal disloyalty, particularly in the wife of a career government official and diplomat.
The Second Stain.
In yet another story, a man deceived his wife about his profession, hiding from her the fact that he disguised himself as a common beggar to make money. Indeed, at the outset of this story, Jay found his detective friend in an opium den, which Jay had volunteered to visit in hopes of convincing another friend to return to his wife.
Oh, of course, the man with the twisted lip.
In a different story, a man was deceived by his wife who did not reveal to him that she had a child from a previous marriage. In this tale, the detective played virtually no role, and one must question why Jay published the case other than to portray a bad marriage. This is reminiscent of another one of his tales in which a wife demanded her husband never ask her about her past. Spousal trust is not common in Jay's accounts.
Yes, that's the dancing, first the yellow face and then the dancing men.
In a story which has enjoyed some popularity among the hoi polloi, a man required that his wife pretend to be his sister, and he subjected her to physical abuse.
Ah, the Hound of the Baskervilles, of course.
In a different story, a man murdered and cut off the ears of his wife and her lover.
Cardboard Box.
In yet another, a man similarly killed his wife and her lover.
Retired Colorman.
In still one more, a married woman who worked in a circus took a lover, a circus strongman, who eventually killed her husband.
The Veiled Lodger.
Wives appear to be less free to murder, however, and the lion they hoped would cover up their act turned on the woman instead, disfiguring her beyond recognition. This is another case in which Jay's detective friend was a passive participant. And one wonders why, with more exciting cases among his files, Jay chose to publish this one. In another story, a husband caused his wife to be imprisoned with her lover in Siberia.
The Golden Pince-Nez. And that brings us to the end of all 13. So, folks, if you were paying attention and got those right, congratulations. I am pleased to say that we got quite a few entries, and I think 6 or 7 got them all right and in all the right order. So, rather than being draconian about this and selecting one at random from all of these, we're going to send a prize to every single one of those 6 or 7 people who managed to get it right.
Hooray!
So you see how magnanimous we are around these parts?
Omne magnanimous.
And that is no trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You take my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
You have made the wrong diagnosis, Doctor. I have my stimulant here.